The Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I know that as we continue to live our lives within the context of this pandemic, there is a soundtrack of fear playing in the background of our minds. Many of us are experiencing an element of fear. I know I do. I fear for the health and well-being of all of my kids and their spouses, all of my grandkids, my extended family, my friends, and all of you. I pray everyone makes it through this pandemic, coming out healthy and whole on the other side after a vaccine is found. So as I am honest and acknowledge that sense of fear, it is comforting to me that our readings today focus on God as our shepherd, the good shepherd. It is reassuring because I know I can place my trust in the good shepherd, regardless of what happens and what the future holds. We just heard the words of Psalm 23. This is probably one of the best known, best loved poems in all of Scripture. It is known by people all around the world. And in fact, I believe it is probably known by many of you by heart. As we live these present days, this psalm tells each one of us that God is like a good shepherd, caring for us, protecting us, and guiding us. God is the good shepherd who walks with us through all of life and provides us with what we need, even in the dark valleys when we experience the shadow of death, even in trying times like those we are now experiencing. In today's reading from the Gospel of John, we hear more about the one we call the Good Shepherd. For the community to which John was writing, living with fear was a familiar aspect of daily existence. John's community lived with the reality of persecution and the threat of extinction. Their first century Mediterranean world was a scary place. Persecutions were heating up, and the followers of Jesus were, in the eyes of the Romans, just more lambs for the lions. The Jesus movement was still new, struggling to define itself against the threat of Rome and the threat of competing philosophies and counterclaims to the truth. So within that social context, these early Christians told stories, often meeting under the cover of darkness, hidden from the authorities, huddled in some secret spot while listening for the sound of Roman boots. they told stories to counter their fear. They told stories that helped to remind them of their identity, to remind them to whom they belonged, and remind them where they could place their trust. When they heard the story of the shepherd and the sheep, it helped them remember who they were and whose they were. It reminded them of their identity as Christians. The metaphor of sheep and shepherd made sense to John's community. In ancient Palestine, multiple shepherds brought their sheep into a common sheepfold for the night. And in the morning, in order to take their sheep out of the fields or out to the fields for grazing, each shepherd had to separate his sheep from the common flock. Each sheep had a name, and each shepherd had a unique way or manner of calling his sheep. So each sheep would respond only to its own shepherd. Even if another sheep called the sheep by its own name, it would not respond. It was the knowing that counted. Yes, John's community knew about good shepherds, and they also knew about bad shepherds. The thieves of the story who taxed the poor into poverty, the ones who starved the people and fed only themselves, the ones who traded the shalom of their tradition for the pax romana of empire. No doubt they longed for a good shepherd. In John's telling of the Jesus story, they hear that Jesus is the good shepherd, the way of comfort and sustenance, abundance and strength, even in the face of death. I can also imagine that in their social context, there were times when the people's fears got the best of them, and they became more concerned about their identity or the identity of the stranger rather than their own identity. But the story of the shepherd helped them to remember a better way. They knew about the way of the good shepherd. And that is always the way of love, not fear. They became people of the good shepherd. In fact, we know that the early Christians began to scratch the image of the good shepherd with the lamb slung over his shoulders on catacomb walls, and they painted frescoes onto baptismal fonts with this image to mark the beginning of life, and carved the good shepherd into tombs to mark the end of life. They belonged to the good shepherd from the beginning of their lives to the end of their lives. The term good shepherd was much more than words, much more than an idea. This understanding of Jesus as their good shepherd deeply shaped their very identity and way of living. They understood they were to live the good shepherd way. The early Christians in John's community knew they belonged, but it did not stop there. The way of the Good Shepherd was a way of wide-reaching embrace. Just as each one had found a safe place belonging on the inside of their faith community, so were they to include those at the far edge, those in the margins, the least of these and the most vulnerable. Just as they had been given hope in violent times, so were they to encourage one another. And just as they were held close in the comfort of the loving shepherd, so were they to reach out, hold others close, comfort others, and care for others. And those early followers of Jesus became known for their generosity, for the way they cared for the very least of these and of the lost, and truly cared for the common good. They became known for their love, and they became the beloved community. Isn't that how we want to be known? Should we not be people who deeply care about the common good of all people and not just our own interests? Is that not why we have been following these orders to stay at home and practice social distancing? It is all about the common good and not just each one of us as individuals. In fact, that is the reason we will continue to follow guidelines, important guidelines, when we can finally begin to gather again for in-person worship. And as we live into a new normal for some time, we want to be known as the beloved community. Friends, even as we live in this present climate of fear, we can live as the beloved community, caring for each other and for the most vulnerable around us. And we do this because we know who we are and whose we are. We belong to the Good Shepherd, who is all about love. The opposite of fear, after all, is love. And that kind of love is not some sweet, sentimental kind of love. No. It is the heavy lifting love of the Good Shepherd. As I have said before, love is hard work, and loving your neighbor can be very hard work. But when we remember our identity and to whom we belong, we are then able to live love. And the practice of love does change the soundtrack of fear, even within our own lives. It enables us to trust the Good Shepherd, the one who calls us by name and has made us his own, even as we walk through the darkest valleys of life. We can trust the Good Shepherd who holds all of us in his love for all eternity. That is our story, the story we tell. We sing together the hymn, "You Are Mine."